I still remember that night vividly, the night I heard the truth. The cold evening air seemed to seep through the walls, sending a shiver down my spine that lingered long after. James, my husband, had invited his friends over for one of their regular guys' nights. Normally, I welcomed the chance for him to unwind with his friends. They'd usually gather in the living room, share a few laughs, play cards, and drink until the early hours of the morning. I had no issues with this little tradition of theirs. In fact, I encouraged it. James worked hard, and if a few hours with his friends could take some of the weight off his shoulders, I was all for it. That night, like every other time, I'd prepared snacks, set out drinks, and made sure they had everything they'd need. I even gave James a quick kiss on the cheek before disappearing upstairs, retreating into the quiet of our bedroom with a new novel I'd been eager to start. I looked forward to losing myself in a fictional world, far from the demands of work and daily life. The sounds from downstairs were soft at first, a low hum of laughter and the occasional burst of a joke too funny to be contained. I felt a small smile tug at the corners of my lips, glad that James was enjoying himself. But as the minutes ticked by, the tone started to shift. The laughter took on a sharper edge, and I could hear James's voice louder than usual, booming over the others in a way that was unfamiliar, almost brash. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to the effect of a few too many drinks. After all, we'd all had those nights where a bit of alcohol made us say things a little too loudly or laugh a bit too hard. But as I strained to hear what they were saying, a chill settled over me. My name had come up, and James was speaking about me in a way I had never heard before. I felt a pang of curiosity, mixed with something darker, anxiety, perhaps, as I closed my book and moved quietly towards the stairs, leaning just close enough to make out their conversation. At first, it was hard to piece together the full context, but as I listened, the words became painfully clear. James was sharing personal details about our life together, things I'd thought were sacred, private, and intimate. Details that only a husband and wife should know. He spoke about my habits, my quirks, even my insecurities, laughing as though they were nothing more than amusing anecdotes for him to entertain his friends with. With every word, my heart sank deeper. I could feel my face flush with humiliation, knowing that my most vulnerable moments were now the punchlines of some twisted joke. His friends laughed along, their laughter harsh and cutting, adding to the hurt that was settling like a weight in my chest. I could hardly believe that James, the man I had trusted with every part of me, was betraying that trust so casually, without a second thought. I took a step back, feeling the floor beneath me blur slightly as the reality of the situation sank in. My mind raced with questions and accusations. How long had he been doing this? Did his friends think of me this way all the time, or was this just an isolated moment of poor judgment? Was I overreacting, or was this the betrayal it felt like? I tried to calm myself, to breathe, to reason it away, but the words kept echoing in my mind, louder and louder with each passing second. I felt exposed, as though I'd walked into the room in my most vulnerable state only to find out that the people around me were waiting to point and laugh. My stomach twisted, and I had to fight the urge to run, to escape the weight of shame pressing down on me. Finally, I knew I couldn't just sit by, silently enduring this humiliation. I had to confront James and let him know that I'd heard everything, that his words had cut me deeper than he could ever understand. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself, straightening my shoulders and slowly making my way down the stairs. My footsteps were soft, but in my mind, they sounded like thunder, each one a drumbeat of hurt and betrayal. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I paused, watching them for a moment, taking in the sight of James and his friends laughing together, oblivious to the pain their words had caused. For a brief second, I thought about turning back, about sparing myself the confrontation. But I knew that would only make me feel worse. I had to face this head-on even if it hurt. Clearing my throat, I stepped into the room, the laughter dying down instantly as they looked up and saw me standing there. James's face went pale, his eyes widening in shock as he realized I'd heard everything. His friends shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other with guilty expressions, the weight of my gaze making them squirm. "Can we talk?" I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. James swallowed hard, nodding as he gestured for his friends to give us a moment alone. They filed out of the room, casting awkward glances in my direction as they left, leaving James and me standing in a silence that felt heavy and oppressive. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the regret written plainly across his face, but that didn't lessen the hurt I felt. Finally, I took a deep breath, my voice trembling slightly as I began to speak. James, do you even realize what you've done? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Do you understand how it feels to hear the person you trust most in the world laughing about your insecurities, sharing things that were supposed to be private? James's face fell, and he opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, stopping him. I wasn't done. I trusted you, James. I trusted you to protect me, to keep our private life sacred. And tonight, you turned it into a joke for your friends. How could you? He looked down, shame written all over his face. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean to hurt you. It was just, we were all laughing and it just came out. I never meant for it to be taken seriously. Not taken seriously? I repeated, my voice rising. James, these are my deepest vulnerabilities. Things I shared with you because I trusted you. And you threw them out there like they were nothing. His shoulders slumped, and he reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away, the hurt too raw for me to even think about forgiveness. I can't just pretend this didn't happen, James, I said, my voice breaking. You betrayed me, and I don't know if I can ever forget that. We stood there in silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. I could see the regret in his eyes, the realization of what he'd done, but it didn't make the pain go away. It didn't erase the humiliation, the betrayal, the feeling of being completely exposed and vulnerable. That night, I went to bed alone, unable to even look at him. I knew we had a long road ahead of us, that this moment would be a defining one in our marriage. It would take time, patience, and a lot of work for us to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. And even then, I wasn't sure if things would ever truly be the same. In the days that followed, James tried to make amends, apologizing over and over, going out of his way to show me that he understood the depth of his mistake. He listened as I poured out my feelings, letting me express the hurt and anger that had built up inside me. He admitted that he'd taken my trust for granted, that he'd failed to protect the intimacy of our relationship.